And then if you need it, just let me know. Let me know. It's no trouble at all. Um, all right. So we're just going to take a deep breath and then we're going to get into the passage. And disclaimer, how I'm working through the passage today is pretty much exactly how I like personally work through passages. I go like a chunk at a time, whether it's a sentence or whether it's an idea. I like to just kind of make sure I can see the picture and then identify, is this important? You know, is this giving us background information? If so, might be important, but I can kind of skim through it. But if it's talking about a person, an idea, their opinions, I might want to take just a little more time, 5 to 10 seconds, just to make sure I have a really good idea about what they're talking about. And I point out, different people or key players or author even, because those are guaranteed questions. Every single time they're going to ask you something about the author. Maybe it's what the author thinks, their attitude, their opinion. Maybe it's what the author thinks about another person giving an opinion. But opinions, whenever they're expressed, whether it's the author's or somebody else's in the passage, that's key. You're going to get at least one question. I've seen as many as 3 out of 6 questions on a passage be asked, asking about these opinions and different beliefs. So hone in on those. We love our key players. We are always going to highlight our key players in these passages. Any questions before we get started? And feel free to use the chat or jump off mute. I think everyone's pretty good about staying muted, but if you have a question, like feel free to hop onto the radio waves. It's looking like I can't see anybody. Oh no. All right, so it looks like we're good to start unless anyone's got a question.
No questions here.
Awesome. Awesome. Yay. Great. So we'll just kind of dive in. And if you've got questions, like I'll make sure we stop periodically. We'll definitely stop at the end of each paragraph and we'll kind of have a chat. But if questions come up, definitely use the chat because I've got the chat. I'm monitoring it. I got you guys. All right. Let's go. I've got my trusty highlighter, and one note about highlighting, I would say it's probably never helpful to highlight a whole sentence because that right there is a whole sentence. But if you're somebody visual like I am, and there's a lot of information out there saying don't highlight it all, it's not quick enough. If you know that you need to highlight some things in order to pay attention, let yourself do it, but maybe think about highlighting a word or 2 there. What's the most important word of that sentence, or what is important to remind yourself that it's in that passage, or paragraph, I should say. I'm going to mix up passage and paragraph quite a lot over the next hour or so. We'll just kind of let's get started here. So we have human endeavor. Okay. Here, okay. I'm already a little intimidated, to be quite honest, but we're gonna be fine. So in certain fields of human endeavor, such as music, chess, and some athletic activities, the performance of the best practitioners is so outstanding. Okay, so whenever we see the word so, they're emphasizing these adjectives. So the author's given us a little bit of perspective here. The performance is so outstanding, so superior, even to the performance of other highly experienced individuals in the field. So they're saying there's certain fields of human endeavor. I don't know what they mean by that. That's kind of vague, but they explain that that's music, chess, athletic activities. I guess our hobbies, we could say. There's certain fields of hobbies where the performance of the best people, practitioners, so I guess, our best athletes, our best chess players, our best musicians, their performance is so great and it is so far above everybody else in the field. Okay, so that's what they're saying so far. It's so above everybody else that some people believe, so we've got some key players here, some people are believing something. And what are they believing? They're believing that some notion of innate talent must be invoked to account for this highest level of performance. So what they're saying here is that there must be some kind of like internal talent that's not necessarily learned. It just kind of comes from within. So they are just so excellent. Like, let's think of Beyonce for a second. I think a lot of us say like, that's just some God-given talent. So they're saying that it's not necessarily all learned. There's an element there that is just inherent, that just naturally God-given. How are we doing with this sentence so far?
Is it good to stop at moments at a time to paraphrase what a section is saying, like what you were just doing?
Yeah, and I think like just be stopping and letting yourself paraphrase it is a really good way to check for understanding, because it means that if you know that you don't really know what's going on there, especially in the first paragraph, sometimes you just have to paraphrase it to discern whether this is important information. So what they've done so far in this sentence is they've created some background for us. They're giving us, what's the topic here. So we're not doing too much with this, but if we don't understand anything else that happens afterward for the rest of this sentence, we know that some people believe that there's innate talent, right? And we have to kind of understand what's going on so that we can understand what these people believe. So since we've got some key players believing things here, we're going to want to pay attention to that. However, if it was something about process and science, they're saying first this asteroid hit that planet and then that planet hit this planet, we might not need to pay attention to that because they're just explaining a process and there's no people involved. We really want to keep track of our key players here. Um, but yeah, I think and some people will prefer to stop at the end of the paragraph and just kind of ask themselves what happened and paraphrase then. I kind of like to go bit by bit, but everyone's different. So if it helps you to kind of just keep reading so that you're making some progress and you get to the end of the paragraph, then do that. Um, for the sake of the fact that there's like 30 people on here, I'm just trying to make sure that we understand and we have smaller built-in blocks, but totally personal preference for sure. All right. Okie doke. So now we're gonna go and look at certain psychologists now. So we see that there's some key players going on here. So certain psychologists have supported this view. So if we remember, this view is that the Beyoncés of our world have this innate talent. Okay. Um, so they're supporting the view that these really talented people must have some kind of innate talent. And how do they support it? They're supporting it with data. Okay, so this data is telling us it's about the performance of prodigies and the apparent heritability of relevant traits. So if we kind of just back up, we have, the broad view. The author is telling us there's some Beyoncés in the world who are just so great. They're so great at their craft. There's got to be some innate talent. And psychologists, our other key players, have come in and given us data supporting it. And they're looking at prodigies, um, and talking about this heritability. So we might get caught up on that word. If we don't know what that is, that's okay. We can kind of either examine it and see what it comes from. So herit sounds like inherit. So we can guess maybe these people are getting these traits from somewhere else, passing them down. But if that kind of stresses you out, we can kind of pin that for a second and think, if we read to the next sentence, maybe they fill us in as to what that context looks like, right? So our next sentence says they have noted, so our psychologists here have noted, for example, so whenever they're giving us examples, we know that they're going to probably explain, restate what they just said. So, and this is why I said at the beginning, if you just need to keep going, then keep going, because ultimately sometimes they explain stuff in different language for us. They know it's a hard passage. So they're not trying to leave us totally out to dry. So our example says, most outstanding musicians are discovered by the age of 6. Okay. And they have found evidence, we love evidence, that some of the qualities necessary for exceptional athletic performance. So they're saying most outstanding musicians are discovered by age 6. I mean, we all knew Beyonce was a beautiful child just singing out the womb, but who knows? And then we have our athletes, and our athletes have exceptional performance, which includes blah, 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 blah. Superior motor coordination, speed of reflexes, and hand-eye coordination. So they just kind of told us what athletes can do. And all of these qualities that are necessary are, it says that they can be inborn in line 16. So, and this is kind of thinking, so if they can be inborn, it's related to our genetics. It's related to what's been passed down. So if we didn't know what heritability meant before, it means that we just kind of had that in our bodies, in our genes, right? So, how are we doing with this passage so far? How are we feeling about this paragraph? And does anyone want to give me their thoughts? Like, if there was some keywords that you would point back to, what would you say? What did you think that this paragraph would be about? Jennifer says this sounds good. Great, 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 great. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. How about
I like seeing like the things you're focused on, like what you're highlighting. I'm always wondering like, okay, what should I focus on highlighting? So I like seeing the examples that you're using, the adjectives and the people.
right, right? I'm glad, Maria. I'm glad that's helpful. And I think, sometimes we see people who are like, I know if I'm reading a paper book, I highlight whole sentences. So as somebody who over highlights, this has been a really big learning curve for me. But what you want to do is it's just kind of thinking, we know we're always interested in people. Why is that? Because people have opinions. Everyone is opinionated. And so if we can kind of think about what people believe or what they're doing, that's like one of the hot spots for these questions. I almost guarantee, like, we know our author is going to get talked about, and then the other people and their views, these psychologists and data. Oh, the test makers love data. They love it. It's great. All right, so we got a lot of comments in here. So we got introduction into the idea of innate talent. That's great, Johnny. I love that. I love it. Oh, hi, Nicole. Thank you. Jennifer saying that the talent may be passed down by genetics. Good. So we've got this idea. They've introduced an idea for us in this first passage and really talking about innate talent. And the psychologists are saying not only is it innate and God given, there's something in us psychologically, biologically, that's putting it down here. Ugo, certain psychologists believe talent is inherited and account for higher performers. Yes. So just coming up with these phrases is going to help us remember, what is paragraph 1 about? And on my paper, I literally write paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, and I give myself a phrase. I know some people who will say, I only get 3 words, and they try to use the 3 key words. Whatever is going to help you to map out what is going on here. All right. So Alexis and Marie talked about highlighting. So Alexis, oh, great. I'm so happy that highlighting helps. I'm so glad. We love it. We love progress. Kamani, I like your example. I'm glad. Yay. We love it. See, we love when it clicks. And I think definitely try this for yourself when you get to reading. Because if there's something in here that works for you, pick it out, replicate it. I won't be mad. This is why it's a free class. The goal is, how do you make this process of studying work for you? Everyone's feeling good. Let's see. I missed some. When I'm done highlighting, do I label premise and main conclusion? I personally don't, but we can kind of think about, I'll ask you, Marie, what do you think the main conclusion of this paragraph looks like?
Hold on, give me a moment. I was about to type something.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. And while Marie's thinking, I'll answer your question, Ewa. It depends. I think in the purpose of, like, when I do classes, I feel like I end up going over, I repeat so much and like do much more synthesis than I do when I'm speed reading. So I keep it in my head, but on the test, I definitely write this down and give myself little phrases here and there. Hold on one second. Faucets. All right. How are you feeling, Marie? Do you think you have
So I was looking through it, and I'm noticing a lot of this paragraph, a lot of this portion is about what other people think, but based off of the author using adjectives like outstanding and superior, I'm beginning to believe that they believe what these other people are believing, like they support it. Good. But the main conclusion, I was thinking it was the beginning. But the end part, when it said can be inborn, has me thinking that it was that was the conclusion. But I was gonna go with the beginning being the conclusion, or the main. They were talking
Yeah.
about human endeavors being so outstanding, so superior, the experience in the field that some people believe some notion of innate must be involved. Like that portion right there.
Right. So some people believe some notion of innate talent must be invoked. Right.
And
So
then the
then we have our
author believes that.
right. And the author believes it. And then the psychologists, they believe some notion of innate talent is the inborn, like the heritability, and they're supporting it with data. So I would actually say that's probably our conclusion. And sometimes, like, it's helpful. Like, I don't necessarily write it down, but I do think about what is this paragraph trying to say? Like, what's the bottom line? And then how is it functioning in our argument? So if we know that the author is, pretty supportive of this view, or it sounds like it, um, that they are bringing up that people believe in this innate talent idea or heritability if you're a psychologist, then we're trying to see what they're doing with that. Uko is asking, would the main point be a summary of all the passage? So the main point of the passage would be, why is the author writing? It's not necessarily just a summary all of the time, but it's going to hit some key points. So here, so far, the author is giving us an overview of what people are thinking. They're saying people believe in this innate talent. And we're not really sure what the main point is going to be yet. We have to read to kind of figure it out. But they're going to construct their argument with each paragraph to give us a takeaway. They might say, this is the greatest idea of all time, and here's how it can be applied. That might be a main point. Or they might switch it up in the last paragraph and say, all of these things that I just said are actually very flawed because blah, 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 blah. And the main point, even if it was just that last paragraph that said it was flawed, we had paragraph 1 explaining the idea, paragraph 2 maybe gave us some positives, and then maybe paragraph 3 says here's all the flaws to those positives and here's why it's a net negative. That could be the main point. And I think people get tripped up on main point questions because they're looking for a summary, when in reality we're trying to figure out how does each paragraph as a premise fit together into the argument, right? I'm so excited. Good questions. We're super engaged today. I love it. So this tells me that later in the day is better for y'all. Great. All right, so let's tackle paragraph 2. So we know that our author is trying to say many people believe in this innate talent, and psychologists specifically believe in heritability of traits. Okay. So until recently, however, so we've got some switching up going on here. So the author's flipping the script on us and we're trying to figure out what's going on. How are we deviating? So until recently, however, little systemic research was done on the topic of superior performance. So basically, this was uncharted territory until recently. And previous estimates of the heritability of traits relevant to performance were based almost exclusively on random samples of the general population. So let's just kind of pause there. So they're saying there wasn't a whole lot of research being done before on superior performance, so like the Beyoncés of our world singing all the way up in the ethers, and previous estimates of the heritability of traits, so trying to figure out how much do we inherit traits, how much are these inborn, as it says in 16, and all these these performance traits that are inborn, they're based almost exclusively on random samples of the general population. So does anyone want to kind of point out what's an issue there that we're seeing? What's the flaw in the methodology right now? If we're talking about, the Beyoncés, and we're looking at random samples of, average Joe, me, what could be some issues with that study?
You can't really compare the two in that sense because the general population is not going to know. Like in sense of Beyonce, they're not going to be not even talented, but not even have the background of that. Whereas Beyonce does have the background. She's been practicing. She's been doing that. So you can't really do a study without kind of having like one. You're just comparing apple and oranges, basically.
Absolutely. I mean, if we were sitting over here and I'm tone deaf, you're comparing me to Beyonce, and we're looking at, how can we inherit the traits to be a great singer? What if we just don't have the traits to be a good singer, right? Awa, not a great sample. Exactly. It is not a great sample. We're just out here doing this the most random. Anybody else have any thoughts on this before we kind of finish our sentence here?
One thing I want to point out with science passages, something that I've noticed is always there's always something that's going to say little research. or research wasn't
Mhm.
done on something that was in the first paragraph. So you'll read the first paragraph and you'll kind of get like what the first paragraph is about and how the research was done. But then in the second paragraph or third paragraph, will kind of tell you, well, until now, there's been little research. So I kind of caught on to that too as well.
Right. Good. And they love in science passages to situate this as, why is this discovery important? The author just wants you to feel like their discovery was important, right? So somewhere we're going to probably find this, like, little research was done here and now we've got this. So they're saying this is uncharted territory, but bam, here's all the stuff I have to say that fills in this gap. Very good observation. All right. So here we've got methodological issues going on. And then they say, we're looking at the general population. Then we can finish our sentence, because we actually have already kind of guessed what they're going to say. So there's random samples of the general population rather than on studies of highly trained superior performers, Beyonce, as compared with the general population. So they're saying we should be looking at other Beyoncés. We should be looking at Whitney Houston. We should be looking at, I don't know, Ariana Grande, whoever else is pertinent here. People who can, go and sing and make me cry. um, so recent research. Okay, so now we're getting to the research that has, upset the apple cart. Before there was little research being done, and now we've got recent research, like Tequila was saying. Recent research in different domains of excellence, so they're talking about this superior performance, suggests that exceptional performance arises predominantly from acquired complex skills. So we've got acquired, we know that's not inborn. So there's acquired complex skills. So like John and Dee was saying, practicing and practicing and practicing, and physiological adaptations. Adaptations. So there's something going on, they got better, rather than from innate ability. So right now they're starting to shift the perspective. So they're saying, before, the author was like, all of this is so amazing. It's happening. It's got to be God-given and inborn. Psychologists even kind of agree. And then there's this recent research that's saying, let's kind of put a break on that. They've got, some practice going in here. There's some physiological adaptations, and it's not just innate abilities. So now we're gonna be puzzled here. So in paragraph 2, we have the shift. We know if paragraph 1 was about innate, paragraph 2 is like, might be a this and then they give us an example in 27. They said, for example, it's been found that the most accomplished athletes, like, so I guess Ronaldo or whatever, show a systemic advantage in reaction time or perceptual discrimination only in their particular fields of performance. So this is a lot of big words, but we have, really great athletes who have some advantages here. Doesn't really matter what the advantages are, because this is just an example, but they have some advantages in their particular fields of performance, not in more general laboratory tests for these factors. So when it comes down to it, and Ronaldo's playing on the soccer field, there's some stuff that is going to be much more present for him. He's going to have some advantages on the field that if he were in a lab, he might not have compared to the general person. Maybe it's like, we get a swole guy and Ronaldo, and they're doing push-ups, and they probably do the same number of push-ups, but you put them both on a field in a real game on the World Cup stage, bam, he's just knocking out people left and right, getting these goals. I'm like, okay, cool. Similarly, superior chess players have exceptional memory for configurations of chess pieces, but only if those configurations are typical of chess games. So they're saying, chess players, they can memorize like whole boards and setups, but these have to be normally occurring in actual matches. So I imagine like Queen's Gambit, like this girl is like dreaming up all these scenarios, playing with herself in the game, right? And she would be able to get it because everything in a match is going to be similar. But if you were to just put the pieces on a board randomly, they wouldn't necessarily remember how to navigate it, because maybe we put some pieces where they wouldn't normally go. So basically, in actual practice situations, these superior Beyoncés of our world or Ronaldos have some kind of advantage when it comes to like actually applying it to their field or to their performance arena, right? What do we think about this paragraph? This one was a little more tricky. It's got a lot of big words. How are we doing with this one?
Are they saying in this particular paragraph that it's not necessarily an innate talent that is more so from hard work or practice? That's what I
That's
got from
exactly
it.
what they're saying. That's exactly what they're
Okay.
saying. And they say it's predominantly, so maybe not necessarily all, but I would probably say predominantly more than half. Um, it's from practice. Very nice catch, Latoya. Brianna said they're offering an alternative viewpoint. Yes, yes. And so this is where we can kind of start contrasting. And whenever we can contrast, we like giggle gleefully and dance with maracas because they love contrast on this test. So if we can kind of think, some people think that it's innate and it's only innate qualities. And then some people think, it's a mix. It's innate qualities, sure, maybe that's present, but it's really predominantly these acquired skills, this practice and the physiological adaptations, things that come into the factor, like they're not just from birth. You acquire them as you go. So if we think about what's going on here, so paragraph 1, they give us, they set the scene. Here's the common viewpoint. Paragraph 2, they said there has been little research done. The research that they did was flawed, but the new research is telling us that it's skills in practice that's going to affect how these people perform. They have some advantages off the bat, and then they practice, and it's good. Okay, how are we feeling? Are we ready to move on? We have some questions, observations. I see a lot of nodding heads. This is good.
So question, was this about, so although the author in the beginning was in agreement to this portion is still the author's opinion. When they say little research was done, that's the author saying little research was done.
Right. They said there was little research done. Now there's some more research. So we can get the sense the author doesn't reject innate skills or innate, talent off the bat, because they just say predominantly, so that doesn't exclude it. So we can probably guess that if the author was in favor of innate talent before, they probably still believe innate talent plays a role here, but they are acknowledging that science is really clear, and they're saying, okay, we've got to take into account these complex skills that you learn and adaptations. It's a really good point, Marie. Good. Let's get into paragraph 3. I'm so excited. Here we are. So the vast majority of exceptional adult performers, okay, so Beyonce's, were not exceptional as children. So, okay, so they're saying, not everybody who sings like Beyonce was exceptional as a child. This gives me hope. Maybe I'm still a child and I could be like Beyonce one day. But it started instruction early and improved their performance through sustained high-level training. So this makes me think of, those people who grow up playing piano since the age of 3. They might not have been, prodigies, but they're so good at age 20 because they've been practicing since age 3. And they keep improving, due to sustained high-level training. So they're not training with just anybody. Like, they've got really good people bringing them up. So what's important here is that most of these performers had early instruction. Oh, I don't want to highlight all of that. Okay. So only extremely rarely, okay, so we got some strong language here. So only extremely rarely is outstanding performance achieved without at least 10 years of intensive deliberative practice. So here the author is telling us, like, you need at least 10 years for most cases. Not saying that, maybe you are the one person, maybe you are the Beyonce who's just been talented for forever and ever and ever. But, for the most part, the vast majority of these, Reynaldos of the world need 10 years at least. With such intensive training, chess players who may not have superior innate capabilities can acquire skills. So if you're a sucky chess player, so for me, if you're a sucky chess player, you can acquire skills that circumvent basic limits on such factors as memory and the ability to process information. So this is kind of sounding like the LSAT. You might be starting at your 120 base score, but if you keep practicing, I love this. I love how this relates. If you keep practicing, you can learn how to get through your basic limits. So you can learn to score into 140, 150, 160 as you keep practicing and keep acquiring the skills and acquiring the knowledge. Like, how do you do logic games? I don't know about you, but your first logic game was probably absolutely scary. And you're like, what am I getting into? But you circumvent your basic limits. You learn how to surpass those limits when you learn how to make inferences, when you learn how to make your setups. And then now your floor, you might have gotten, 0 right. Now you're getting like, you're getting at least 5 to 10. And then you keep practicing, maybe you study for 10 years and then you're like absolutely perfect at logic games. It doesn't take that long. But, so what they're saying is, these people they're practicing, and they have skills like memory and the ability to process information that they've built up, and now that they are these peak performers. This is just sounding like the LSAT. I'm so excited. This makes me excited. Recent research, okay, so we got more research here, shows that with the clear exception of some traits such as height, a surprisingly large number of anatomical characteristics, including aerobic capacity and the percentage of muscle fibers. So there's some exceptions of traits, and they just listed a bunch. We don't need to necessarily remember these, but a clear exception of some traits shows specific changes that develop from extended intense training. Okay, so I like specific changes and intense training. So they're saying that there's some pool of research contributing to the recent research. And, there's some traits that you just, you can't develop those. Like you can't naturally be as tall as like Jeremy Lin or whatever. But there's quite a few things like aerobic capacity, percentage of muscle fibers. Those those come from intense training. So, you might be naturally tall, but it doesn't mean you're naturally swole. Because if you're swole, you had to go work out in the gym. You had to have that intense training to build up that muscle mass, right? So they're making a distinction here between, naturally tall people and people who really do hard work in the gym. Even though you can be both, they're saying, some traits you can't just have. You got to work for the other ones. How are you feeling about paragraph 3? How did this go for you? Got some nodding heads here. Good. I love it. I love it. Good. Sounds good. Seems realistic. Great. So if we were to kind of think about how we'd characterize paragraph 3, how would we feel about paragraph 3? What is it doing for our argument so far? If paragraph 1 is saying, here's a common viewpoint, innate skills and traits. Paragraph 2 is saying, hold on, we actually need to incorporate practice and intense training. And then paragraph 3, how does it build onto that argument? Provides evidence. It adds to the theory idea. Good. It's adding, expanding on the recent research. Yep. So it's zooming in and getting really specific and helping us to make sense of this recent research. Very good. Very good. So we can tell already the author is trying to get us to think about, what is the point of these innate traits? How do they relate to these skills that you learn? And then he's really emphasizing some of them, like, there are some innate traits here, like height, but there's something you can't skip leg day in order to build your leg muscles. Some of these you actually have to use, gain via practice. All right, last paragraph, friends, we're doing great. The evidence does not, therefore, support the claim. Okay, so now he's saying, here's some evidence. They got into paragraph 3 about what this evidence is saying. They got really, really specific. And now here's the disclaimer, giving us a disclaimer. The evidence does not support, let me highlight a little less of this, does not therefore support the claim that a notion of innate talent must be invoked in order to account for the difference between good and outstanding performance. So they're saying, you don't need to just naturally have God-given like the ability to sing in order to differentiate between like a good singer and Beyonce. Since it suggests instead that extended intense training together with that level of talent common to all reasonably competent performers. So they're saying, let's kind of break this down because they've got a conclusion in here. They've got a sense, so we know that there's a premise. They're saying innate talent is not enough to say that this is what makes someone, the Beyonce versus just like a good singer. And they're saying the reasoning behind that is that, extended intense training, so, leg day at the gym, together with a level of talent common to all reasonably competent performers. So if you have the baseline um, ability to sing, let's say, and you are practicing your scales every day, you're warming up and doing all those good things that Beyonce probably does, it might be good enough to make it between, good and excellent. So there's hope for us. If we can carry a tune and we practice hard, we might be able to do what Beyonce does. This gives me hope. Too bad I'm tone deaf. Since sustained intense training usually depends on an appropriate level of interest and desire. So they're saying most people who are training a whole lot are interested, they're engaged, and they want to be good. Let's see what this says. And since those who eventually become superior performers often show early signs of exceptional interest, than early evidence of unusual ability. So they're saying, since, people who are very, let's kind of go back, I just forgot. So since we have people who have, if you're training and you've been doing it for a long time, you're interested and you actually want to get better. And since if you're becoming a performer, you usually have interest more so than just the ability. So it means like you can't just be good. You can't be Beyonce if you don't like singing. It's highly unlikely that you're just going to keep singing. It says that motivational factors are more likely to be effective predictors of superior performance than innate talent. So now they're just kind of throwing in here motivational factors. Okay, and how these motivational factors are linked to, the ability to practice, sustained practice. And they say the link between sustained practice and motivation is that like these people are self-selecting. If you're sustaining your practice, if you are practicing your scales every day for 10 years, you're probably very interested in being a better singer. You want to be Beyonce. And two, oh gosh, now I forgot what the other part was. You're interested in being Beyonce and you want to be Beyonce. That's what they're saying. It's a self-selecting pool. So it all correlates. So what they're doing in paragraph 4 is they're getting really clear about what the evidence supports and does not support. The author's like, let me just be clear in case you took me out of context. The evidence doesn't support the idea that talent is enough, that the innate talent. You have to perform, you have to continue like getting extended intense training. And that's because, if you have extended intense training, you're probably interested in getting better. You want to get better. You love what you're doing. And so they're saying motivation is going to be part of this. Okay. How are we feeling about this? This last paragraph was a doozy, and I'll definitely chat with you more about it because there's a reason why it's hard. How are we feeling now that we're at the end of the passage? We did it.
So I was
feeling okay. Yeah.
So is paragraphs 4, 3, and 2 basically negating what paragraph 1 said? Because in paragraph 1 it was basically saying that innate talent, if you could have been born with it, you could have been discovered when you were 6. But in every other paragraph is basically saying that no, that's incorrect. That you have to have motivation, you have to have interest. So there's different factors that go into it. So is all the rest of the paragraphs negating what paragraph 1 says, or is that not exactly what it's doing?
So paragraph 1 is saying that innate talent must be invoked. It's necessary. We got a necessary condition there.
Okay.
If we're familiar with necessary conditions, a common flaw is that we think necessary conditions are sufficient. So there's like what's happening in the rest of the passage from paragraph 2 all the way till 4. They're saying here's all these other things that are necessary. So innate talent is not sufficient to be Beyonce necessarily in all cases. So that's what they're saying. It's not outright negating it, but they're making sure that you just don't that you don't misunderstand what they're trying to say with the evidence.
Okay.
Yeah, they're like, don't forget that you should probably practice. You're not going to be a basketball player if you're not, naturally 6 foot tall. So they just want to make sure that everyone knows, it's more than likely you need complex skills and you need the motivation. Anybody else? How did you feel about this passage overall? We're feeling silent. Okay, that's cool. So if we look at that last paragraph, oh, Jennifer understood it well. Great. We love it. So this last paragraph, they're giving us like a lot of specific details about what something understands, and what something understands, what can be taken from the evidence, and they're kind of linking all of these different, very specific details. They're saying something suggests something else. They're saying something depends on something else. They're creating a lot of conditional sentences, and whenever they get granular like this, whenever they say something usually depends on something else, you could almost anticipate a question that they're going to really want to understand, a scenario that they give you with these rules that they've given us, or maybe not rules, but these observations that they've given us in paragraph 4. So that's usually the line reference that they give us, or something directly stated. So we're going to want to be careful about that. We don't necessarily have to get all in the weeds, but they're, at the very least, what we should have taken out of paragraph 4 is that you need motivation. And the reason why you need motivation, they say it's related to all these other things. Somewhere in the middle, paragraph 4. Yeah, Marie, I think paraphrasing the overall paragraph, sometimes like you might just have to go a sentence at a time or an idea at a time, and that's fine. The goal is, keep letting yourself just kind of paraphrase so you can move on. And if you don't quite understand, then you know how to read the next sentence, and maybe you're looking for context, or maybe you're trying to link, is this something that's supporting the next sentence? Is it supporting the main conclusion or the main purpose of that passage? Yeah, this is a whole lot. So pat yourselves on the back. I'm going to pat myself on the back. Pat yourself on the back for getting through this, because this is that third passage often is either really easy or really technical. And they know it's because you've got one more to go. They want to make sure you just don't quite get to the last one and you get caught up. So if you just kind of keep moving forward, and letting yourself just kind of like breathe, skip some things, look for context later, you're going to be just fine. It's going to be great. So now we can start looking at these questions, and I'll go ahead and put up a poll, so we don't have anybody shouting out the answer. So I'll let you kind of think about what was the main point of the passage. If we remember paragraph 1, we have this statement about innate talent being necessary. Paragraph 2, paragraph 3, they really get into, you need for performance. They talk about the recent research. They're saying you got to practice. Practice is also necessary. And then in paragraph 4, they're saying it's not to say that that innate stuff is enough. It's not sufficient. But they're saying, you need the practice, and ultimately that links to motivation being a necessary component. I'll give you probably another minute and a half or so to kind of pick an answer. And if you have no idea, that's okay. I want you to just go with your gut choice. And we're going to talk about all the questions, or all the questions, all the answer choices, because these are written by psychologists. The test makers know that there's going to be some lines of thinking that lead you to certain wrong answers, and that's okay. We're just going to go through it. So pick your best guess. Got another minute or so. So just go ahead. It's going to be fine. Is anybody else having the issue where it's not showing you poll answer choices? That's really odd. You can also feel free to chat me in private chat what your answer is, just so we don't spoil it for anybody else. But if you're finding that it's not working for you, just go ahead and shoot me a private message, and then I'll kind of like add that to our tally. We probably got another 10 seconds on here. So we'll kind of just let you pick your final answers. It's okay. Just go with your gut on this one. 3, 2, 1. All right. So I'll go ahead and share. Most of y'all picked D. I will have the disclaimer that not everybody answered, and that's okay. We had a couple people in private chat that also said C, and a couple people who also said A. So there was a little bit of answers all over the board. Some people are messaging me right now, changing their answer. That's completely fine. So I'll just kind of go through. So it looks like let's kind of think about how we answer these choices. So the main point, what many people fall into on the main point, is that often we get really way too specific. We find things that are true, but they're way too specific. They might be the main point of a certain paragraph. Or you've got some half truths in there. So we read the first part, we say, oh, that looks good, and we pick it. But when we look at the answer choice at the end, we realize that the last part was actually a lie and it's not supported by our passage. So if we look at A, researchers have recently found that many inborn traits, including a surprising number of physical characteristics and motivational factors, can be altered through training and practice. Does anybody have any thoughts on A? Because it looks like a lot of people did not pick A. So does anyone want to say why they didn't pick A?
I didn't choose A because it says that the um the physical characteristics and motivational factors can be altered through training and practice, but it doesn't say that. Like it just didn't fit, so I eliminated that one immediately.
Good. Good. And you're right. It doesn't really talk about alterations here. Although we do know that training and practice help us to become, performers. We have no idea about, altering our physical characters. Imagine if you could just train to be taller. Oh my goodness. I would be so happy. I'm so short. All right. Now let's look at B. Quite a few people picked B. So let's think about that. So recent research into the origins of superior performance gives evidence that in sports, music, and other fields of activity, anyone can achieve exceptional levels of performance with sustained, intense practice and training. So for someone who didn't pick B, what made you feel icky about this choice?
I can say why.
Yeah.
So
And I love the chats going on too.
I didn't select B because I'm very cautious of like answer choices in reading comp where it's kind of very definite, and the word anyone kind of turned me off from it, because I remember in the passage it said that in addition to intense practice and training, that individual will also have to have talent. So I think that anyone makes that scope way beyond it, and like doesn't isn't accurate with what the passage said.
Right, right. And we want to be very careful of strong language if the question is not asking about strong language already. And so anyone, you're totally right, Brianna. It just kind of negates the fact that they're saying, yeah, you gotta have all these other things too. Right. And I just love how the chat, everyone's like, if anyone, disgusting. Now let's look at C. I think C was an interesting choice, contrary to previously accepted theories of the development of expertise. Researchers have now shown that innate characteristics are irrelevant to the differences in performance among individual practitioners in various fields of activity. That just makes me sound like I'm like super smart and using a lot of big words. But AWA said irrelevant. That's not true. Just means like, yeah, that's bad. Yeah, we really are not liking the word irrelevant. And that's, they're hoping that you see the contrast or the pivot that the author makes. Because in paragraph 1, they're saying some people think innate stuff is it's necessary. Some people think that that's all there is. But here's all these other things. And the author is not necessarily negating it, but they are saying, these other things are important. And so we want to be careful not to just completely throw it out and say they're irrelevant. But C is a pretty tricky answer choice for a lot of people. So very nice job with that one. Now, what do we make of D? D was the one that most people picked. The word irrelevant through the author didn't agree with the innate talent. Yep, that's very good. Very, very wise observation. Now, how do we feel about D? Recent research involving superior performers in various fields indicates that outstanding performance may result from adaptations due to training rather than from innate factors. What do we think about this choice?
I chose D because it actually summed up all 4 paragraphs, and it's saying that you're not necessarily talented because of being born with the talent, but more so because of wanting to be talented and also train for it. So
Right.
that's why I chose D.
Good, good. And the training, if we remember paragraph 4 is saying training leads to, like it's linked to the increased motivation and the desire. There's all these things that, if we were to kind of think about this what training summarizes, it summarizes paragraph 4 for us. And I think, you did really good and think, it touched on every single paragraph. And this is one of the cases where the main point, does reach all the every single paragraph in some way, shape, or form. There's going to be other main point passage questions that just doesn't necessarily hinge on every single paragraph. It might only talk about the last two. So there's some cases where our main point questions, if our paragraph was structured in such a way that the first 2 paragraphs are background, the third paragraph is, just random, here's a problem, and then paragraph 4 is the solution, it might only focus on the last 2. So what this author has done a really nice job of pulling us in throughout the paragraph consistently, or passage consistently, to make sure that we're touching on everything. So I like that Gabrielle said it most agrees with the passage. Kind of. Yep. Yep. Kind of threw you off. I get that, Jennifer. Jonathan said it's provable. That's a key too. We know that every answer choice, regardless of question, is going to be able to be provable without too many extra assumptions directly in the text. Alexa said it's in the majority. You're absolutely right. And then Jennifer said if it said rather than innate factors alone, she wouldn't have hesitated. And I think that innate factors alone, I think that is such that was gross. I think that's a really good point. I definitely think that would have made it a little too easy. So they want you to think. They want you to think about it. And I think the other thing too that we really like about D is that it says may result. So they're saying, you don't necessarily need the innate factors. And there is a part, and I think this is what Jonathan was alluding to. There is a part that says, you could train and it'll make up for, all these differences if you just have this sustained high level of training. And Josephine picked it because of the may. Yeah, may. Such a non-committal answer choice. But we love that when it gets to reading comp for sure. And then let's kind of look at E and just make sure we know why it's wrong. So psychologists who previously attributed early childhood proficiency in such activities as chess and music and chess to innate talent have revised their theories in light of new evidence and the effectiveness of training and practice. So I'll just kind of, in the interest of time, I'm like, did we revise these theories? Did we really revise them? I don't think we did. And I think, that's one of those where this answer choice sticks out to people who are, they know that there's theories going on in this passage. Whitney said, this sounds like stuff they made up. Absolutely. These people, it's hard work to come up with a whole 4 wrong answer choices here. That's a lot of, I was going to circle it. It's a lot of hard work. So there's always going to be one that you're like, really, you could have done better. They were tired. It was like 12 a.m. when they were writing this, clearly. How are we feeling about this answer, or about this answer choice, this question? Are we ready to move on to number 15? Got some folks feeling good. Excellent. Excellent. So we'll go ahead. I'll take this poll down and I'll put up our next poll for number 15. I'll scroll down so we can see it. So now we're asking ourselves, what is the primary function of the final paragraph? And I know it says most accurately, but that's really keyword for there's only one right answer. And these other ones you might be able to justify if you assume a lot. So we want to be careful about pulling in excess information. I'll give you another minute and a half. So when it hits 2 minutes, we'll just kind of close up the poll and then move forward.
Can you scroll up to the paragraph just to refer to it? I know you can't do both at the same time.
The final paragraph. Can you? Oh, up there. So I'll give people another like 15 seconds, and then I'll scroll up, and then I'll come back down.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to scroll up if you need at the end of that passage, and then, I'll give you another 15, 20 seconds, just kind of absorb that, and we'll go right back down. All right, so we're going to roll back down here to the question. Which one accurately represents the primary function in the final paragraph? We'll give it another 15 seconds or so. Just go with your best gut choice if you're not quite sure. It's okay. It's a learning experience. All right, last call for answers. I see some frantic answers in here. So 3, 2, 1. Awesome. I'm really impressed with the folks who got it in like the literal second that I closed it. And I think that's sometimes what we have to do with ourselves too. Some people don't like to answer unless they absolutely know. And on the test, sometimes you might be sure, you might be between two answers. Go with your first gut choice unless there's something really bothering you about content, because studies show that we often talk ourselves out of the wrong answer. So it's asking us which of the following most accurately represents the primary function of the final paragraph. And y'all were mostly split between C and E, and then there were some people who also put D. So let's kind of go through. So why did we not like A? It makes proposals for educational reform based on the evidence cited by the author. Who wants to tell me why this is wrong? Educational reforms. Yeah, I imagine so many of you are like, what in the world? This is out of scope. Good. Although, I'm definitely one of those who's looking into education policy. So I got excited when I saw that phrase, educational reform. But yeah, no. And you're totally right, Marie. We don't make a proposal. And I think for some people who get tripped up by language, if we just kind of were to look at this answer choice, the main point of this answer choice is that it makes proposals. No proposals are being made. You're totally right. We could just eliminate the rest of that and focus on that first 3 words, because that's the core of that sentence. And I think too, sometimes you might need to take that kind of method, eliminate all your fluff from your answer choices to see if that's your answer. So let's look at B. Who wants to talk about B and why we didn't like this one? No demonstration, 2 consequences. You weren't sure about the 2 consequences. Oh, Brianna has her hand raised. I'm so sorry. If you've been hand raising, I've just missed them. Go ahead, Brianna.
I think I raised my hand a long time ago and I forgot to put it down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think I ended up speaking anyway, but I didn't pick, I'll answer again. I didn't pick B because it demonstrated 2 consequences of the findings relating to. I don't think it necessarily said that they were at odds with one another. It just suggested that one was a little bit more effective.
Right. And I love that everyone in the chat is like 2 consequences at odds. Oh, goodness. Yeah. And I think, we're not really sure about the consequences. And you're totally right, Brianna. Like, we're not thinking that they're at odds. We're just saying, the author, if anything, believes that we can have both. It's just predominantly, these learned traits, these acquired skills that we get from hard, intense practice. So it's not B. So let's look at D. I'll skip because, most of us were between C and E. What did we not like about D? And feel free to come off mute if you want to say your piece, or we can put it in the chat. But what was so iffy about D? Future research. Do you want to elaborate on that, Ewa? Oh, didn't remember reading. So we're looking at D right now. Possible objection. Good. Yeah, we don't really have a possible objection coming out here on D, right? Raises and answers. Well, you need an objection to do those things. It's definitely not D. Very good. But it's okay. It's okay. So talk to me about C, Ewa. Why did you not like C? Because you started talking about future research. Why else did you not like C? You just didn't remember reading anything? This is true. And two, so they have the recapitulates the evidence against supposed heritability, supposed. So we know that the author, it makes the author scheme a little skeptical, doesn't it? And we know the author wasn't really, totally against all this innate heritability of traits and whatever. They were just saying, oh, well, I kind of do believe that there's some level of innate traits. And here's what psychologists say, but they're not really advocating for future research whatsoever. So that is why it wouldn't be C. So we go with E. Now, for E, did anyone have trouble picking between two answer choices and then finally settled on E? Let me just make sure I'm looking through to see if anybody raised their hand. Yeah, so Josephine, so what were you between and how did you settle on E? Josephine or Whitney or anybody else really too. But I'll start with you two. What was it that tipped you over to E? The possible factors. Okay. And Gabrielle was between D and E. And then Heather was between C and E, didn't like future research. Good. So we know, like, I think what makes C an attractive answer choice is that we do know that there's evidence. And we do know that there's research going on. And we do know that there's heritability of outstanding talent. It's really reading for, how do we think about the author? Does the author think it's supposed and it's questionable? And I think that's where we have to remind ourselves, be really picky, be super picky. Are we thinking, would the author say it's supposed heritability or would the author just say that it's heritability? Or if we look at D, the author's view of importance of intense training. Well, we know that the author doesn't really give a whole lot about the importance, that they're just talking about intense training, what the link is. And so we might be questioning ourselves, like, what does the author think about this, right? The test makers are assuming that you're asking these questions, and that's why they put D in there. But E, we can be confident in E because we do have some reasons why development of superior performance. Oh gosh, that was gross. We do know that they're saying why it could be that superior performance happens, because we have our innate factors and then we have our learned factors. And I think what's hard and what makes E a little tricky is that we have inferences. We don't know these things, inferences necessarily off the bat. We have to kind of think about it and think, what is the role of these two things? And then we might think, oh yeah, these are inferences. D, they didn't question training. This is true, Heather. They did not question training in D. That is very true. All right, how are we feeling about 15? Are we ready to move on to 16, 17, 18, 19? And I know folks might have to go. If you have to go and you can't stay the whole time, that's okay. Just like PM me your email and I'm happy to send you the recording. / if anybody else wants this recording, happy to send it to y'all. Just drop your email in a private chat and feel free to leave as you need to. I don't want to hold anybody up. But for those who can stay, we'll just kind of keep moving on. All right. So we've got number 16. I'll put up the new poll here. And it's asking which one of the following can most reasonably be inferred from the passage. And inference questions are really difficult because what they're doing is, they're not necessarily explicitly stated, but we're saying, with very little inferences drawn, that are pulling in outside information, we could prove this with the text. I'll give you another minute and a half or so to pick your choices. All right, responses are starting to come in. It's exciting. We'll get another 15 seconds or so. If you're not sure, just go ahead and pick one, and we'll kind of discuss them too. If you're between things, let me know. Feel free to put that in the chat. All right, I'm gonna close it in 3, 2, 1. Some of y'all are real daring. You wait till the last minute. You must thrive when you see the 5 minutes remaining warning. So this one is pretty interesting. We've got an even split between A, B, and E. A couple people had C. And then, Heather said she was between B and E. So clearly this is, inference questions are always hard. So let's kind of think through. So does anyone, we'll kind of read A. In at least some fields of human endeavor, it would be difficult or perhaps even impossible to ascertain whether or not a superior performer with an extensive training has exceptional innate talent. So people who voted for A, why did you like A? Let's flip it right now. Why did you like A as an answer choice?
I chose A because it's saying that you can't really tell if they are naturally born with the talent or if they've practiced to obtain the talent. And that speaks to the passage for me.
Gotcha. And so where did you go in the passage? Like, do you remember what related to it?
Paragraph 2, where it says, it's contrasting it, and it says, it comes with practice. Well, my notes I took down for paragraph 2, I put comes with practice, not necessarily an innate talent.
Gotcha.
And for me, A summed that up.
Mm-hmm. Now, for folks who didn't like A so much, what were your issues with A?
I didn't like that it said perhaps even impossible.
Gotcha. Now, do you have, so some people are agreeing with you. They thought it was too strong.
Yeah, same. I think the language is too strong.
Gotcha. Language, difficult and impossible to ascertain. So I'll come back. So people who picked A, so some people picked A and they didn't think the language is necessarily too strong. So I'm kind of curious to go back up to the passage and see. Oh, we're gonna keep this line, I guess. So if we look back up at passage 2. Okay, maybe I just need to take off my annotation. Let's clear it for now. Okay. So we look at passage 2. We have estimates being done with the little research that was going on, recent research being done. Um, and it says that exceptional performance arises predominantly. So that's not really clear, but we'll kind of see what's going on here. And then they give us an example here. So we know that there's innate abilities in play sometimes, and then there's complex skills and physiological adaptations. And then, in paragraph 3, remember they're talking about traits, linking together, they get really detailed about these learned skills. And then in paragraph 4, that's actually something that might really help us out here. They're saying instead of intense training, with a level of talent common to all reasonably competent performers, it might suffice to account for a difference. So there's a whole lot of factors being teased out here. It's not necessarily a linear process to get to, how much we can estimate these things. Maria, are you raising your hand? Oh, sorry. I just want to make sure I don't miss people raising their hands. Sorry. So this and inferences are hard. We're not really necessarily sure all of the time what's going on here, but we can get the sense that maybe difficult might be a strong word, maybe impossible is a strong word. We don't see those coming up in the passage, but we do know that it's not a linear progression to estimate these things. So I probably wouldn't weed out A necessarily at first, but we do want to keep in mind here. Let me use the lines because that might be more helpful. Difficult or perhaps impossible are some really strong language. So let's look at B. So people who liked B, didn't like B, feel free to chime in. What did you think about B? Whether it's positive, negative, why did you choose it or not choose it?
I didn't choose it for the language as well. It says many years of intense, deliberate practice and very high. So I just kind of felt like the language is a little bit too strong.
Definitely. Well, what do other people think about this too? I think there's a lot of strong language in this one.
Yeah, I didn't think the passage talked about the highest level of innate talent. So that's what threw me off from selecting answer choice B.
Right. They don't really tell us, what your innate talent has to look like. You're totally right. Highest level. That's some real, ethers, like in the ethers. We really don't know. You're totally right. That's not necessarily supported. So we can take B out at least. Be consistent here. All right. So there weren't a ton of votes for C and D, but does somebody want to tell me why they didn't pick C or why they didn't pick D?
C said that talent is a prerequisite to exceptional performance. We realized that wasn't true in the passage.
Right. And that's, if we look at paragraph 4, he's coming back. Like we know that like they're saying it's not absolutely sufficient. It might be true that they don't have any talent whatsoever, but if you practice enough, it gives us hope. Maybe we too can be like Beyonce if we can just do our scales every day for 10 years, 20 years. Very good. Now, what do we think about D? So that one nobody voted for. What was it about D that made it so icky?
Innate talent probably being an obstacle that was not mentioned anywhere in the passage.
Right. And even if it said like might be an obstacle, we know that the author doesn't agree with that. They're saying innate talent, helps you to be that person. And then they also don't really talk about complacency outright, and that being naturally talented makes you complacent. All they said was if you're working really hard to make these skills, that you definitely have a drive. But just because you're not doesn't mean you're complacent. So now what do we think about E? But some folks also picked this one. So this one was definitely an attractive choice too. Oh, I missed my chat. Uh-oh.
I picked E because in the passage it so in the answer it says the skill does not depend in any way on innate talents of individuals, and in the passage it kind of referenced that in the sense of if you have the interest in it, um that and you work hard, then you're still able to be exceptional or superior.
I see some agreement with that in the chat. Thanks, Amber. So I think this is, these between A and E, these are the two most popular answer choices on the actual exam. One is correct and one is incorrect. And I think what makes E really attractive is you're right. They talk about skill. We could have somebody with no innate talent and they would still be able to be a really great performer. Although, now we have a couple people saying anyway does not depend in any way. That's what's throwing them off here. And that actually, and I'm glad you guys brought that up because that's actually what eliminates this answer choice. Because if we remember, our author was saying, you could be talented and like you could be talented and whatever not, that definitely will help you. But if you're not talented, you could still be like the greatest performer ever. And then they talk about how the acquired skills, the practice feeds into us getting to be the Beyonce level performer. But if innate talent does not contribute anything, then we'd have to wonder, what is the skill that they have in any way is just a little too strong. But I think if they had said, in some fields, the production of exceptional skill does not require innate talents, you're totally right. It's not totally necessary. But there is some link there. They're saying they're not eliminating the possibility of a link. But in this answer choice right now, does not depend in any way. They're like, yeah, these aren't even related. We're done. So that, we have to be really careful because I think, there's some tricky language there that makes E the one of the most popular choices for this test. But if we remember, if we go back to A, all we know is that, it's just kind of messy trying to estimate what is due to innate talent and what's due to training. It's not straightforward or a linear estimate. So we would go with A on this answer. How are we feeling about this? Because this is really, really tricky. Yeah, and I think too, that's pretty consistent, AOL. Like that one, the third or fourth question often will just blow people out of the water with the inference. I totally agree with you there. Yep, it's super tricky. All right, so let's go ahead and look at 17. Thank you.
Quick question. So for inference questions, should we gravitate? Can you hear me?
You're cutting in and out a little bit, but I feel like if you just kind of
for inference questions, would you say?
Would you say?
Would you say strong language is good for inference questions?
No. I think strong language is usually the reason we eliminate a lot of the inference answer choices, because the inferences are usually the author, unless the author is super, super bold. Usually your inference is going to have some impartial, wishy-washy language, because then it's not technically breaking any rules. You would have strong language if your author said, this is like all clowns absolutely have red noses all the time. If our answer choice said, if you're a clown, you must have a red nose, that probably would be a correct answer. More often we'll see answer choices that are correct that say, if you're a clown at so-and-so circus, you probably have a red nose. That could all, like, that's usually what our right answer will look like, because it's non-committal. It's like, probably there's room for error. But if our author in the passage was super, super strong, then you could consider some strong language. Otherwise, we kind of want to veer away from it as much as possible. Mhm. Yeah, no problem. So now we're getting to my favorite kind of question. These are also tricky. These are the ones that require you to really think about what was said in the passage. So they're asking, which of the following does the passage say is usually necessary in order for one to keep up intense practice? Oh, and to respond to your question, eat predominantly, um, I think predominantly it seems like a strong word, but that's they're saying mostly, majority. So it's not saying all, it's not saying every. So technically, in terms of our logic language, that's going to be one on the softer side. All right, so we've got quite a few answers on this already, and it's taken a pretty clear lead. So I'll give it another, 15 seconds or so. Pick your gut choice. Pick your gut choice. All right, last call for answer. I'm gonna close this poll real quick. All right, so I'm just gonna say it right now. A was our correct answer. The passage does say that it needs desire and interest, and that's, I think, in paragraph 3. If we go, or paragraph 2, 3. Oh, it's paragraph 4, down here, line 55, 56, 59, where it says sustained intense training usually depends on an appropriate level of interest and desire. A very good job with this one. In these line reference questions, the key is knowing where am I going to find this in my passage. So if you had been taking a note or two, some people do it in their head, some people do it on paper. You might have 1, 2, 3, 4, and some keywords. Um, Paragraph 4 is where they're getting all into these details. And I think I would caution us because I think, there's a lot of answer choices here that are wrong that make a lot of sense to us. And so here we're thinking, oh, I could see that. I understand how that could be the right answer. So I would caution you if you're thinking about, oh, this makes sense to me. Like this is what my real world experience is like. Red flag. Let's not even go there because that's what's going to get you to a wrong answer. They know that it's not necessarily just in the passage. That's in your head. So we got to help ourselves not make so many assumptions. All righty. This one was good. Oh, this is amazing. All right, so now let's go ahead and look at number 18. We're almost to the end. So it's asking which one of the following most accurately describes the author's main purpose in the passage. This is very similar to our main point question earlier. We'll give it another minute or so. It looks like folks are taking a little longer on this one. All right, so we'll give it another 10 seconds or so you can kind of pick your gut choice. All right, so 3, 2, 1. You guys are picking answers up until the very end. So it looks like most people went ahead and picked C. We had a couple votes for some other answer choices. So if we look at the main purpose in the passage, so we know that the author is telling us about, this old way of thinking Then in paragraph 2, they're saying, okay, so there wasn't a whole lot of research, but here's some recent research and here's what it's saying. It's changing our perspective. So it's not just innate talent. We really need these skills to be developed, and that's necessary. And then in paragraph 4, they kind of 3 and 4, they make some more sense of that for us. They tell us about motivation as well. So a quick way to go through these, when we think about what is the author doing, it's helpful to kind of read through, when you're reading through the passage, to ask yourself that question with each paragraph. What are they doing in this paragraph? It's helpful to do that throughout the passage, so that when you get to the end, you're thinking, what did they do overall? They talked about a lot of evidence. They talked about a lot of research. So if we think about it, is their job to illustrate and illustrate ways that a theoretical model can be applied? I don't know about you, but I don't know what the theoretical model is. I don't know what they're trying to apply it to. And I think our author wasn't necessarily just trying to illustrate something. They were trying to teach us. They were trying to give us a lot more of this evidence that's out here. So A is not our correct answer. Okay. And if we look at B, so what we say that our author is trying to argue, and a couple of y'all picked this, but what would they be arguing for? The evidence that was previously taken, in fact, supports an opposing theory. So we don't necessarily have opposing theories in this. We've got, one saying that the innate learning is necessary. And then later in paragraph 4, the author is saying, okay, not to say that, it's completely irrelevant, but you do need these other things, and here's why. So we want to be careful with opposing theory, but the author isn't really arguing anything to us. They're just trying to enlighten us about all this new research, right? So it's not B. Now if we look at C, to show a body of recent research. So I love that they're already talking about research already. Provides evidence, okay, we love that certain views based on earlier research are not applicable to a particular class of cases. This is looking really nice, because we know that the issue with former research was that they looked at, average Joe who can't hold a tune to kind of think about, how does Beyonce function and what makes her great, right? So this one is looking pretty good. We can kind of review our other answer choices if we're not sure. So in D, to defend, okay, defending, I don't know what we're defending, but defend an author's new interpretation of data. I don't know, there is data, but I don't know if we're interpreting it in a new way. And defend it against probable objections that might be raised. There, we don't do that. And none of you thought that either. I'm very proud of you for that. We weren't defending it against probable objections. So it's not D. And then E, to explain how a set of newly formulated abstract theoretical postulations, so it sounds like a set of new hypotheses, relates to a long-standing body of experimental data in a different but related field of inquiry. So they're taking new hypotheses and relating them to long existing bodies of experimental data. So this one's tricky, but we know in the beginning of paragraph 2, they tell us there hasn't been a lot of research so far, but here's what the recent research says. So there's no long-standing body of experimental data. So we can eliminate E and take C as our answer. How are we feeling about this one? This one was definitely real wordy. I think I like the main point one better rather than main purpose. How are we feeling with this? Good. We got some people feeling real good. Great. We love it. We love feeling good going into the last question. All right. So we'll go ahead. You read too fast. Oh, and it's good to know, like, why are you missing these questions? Because a lot of times if you just kind of like went a little bit slower and just kind of let yourself work through it, you realize, there are a lot of questions that we get wrong because we just read a little too quickly. And I think when we're so stressed about trying to give ourselves the most time possible for the questions, we read the passage quickly, we skim through the questions, and then we reread each of the answer choices a million times, but we're not actually absorbing them. All right, so we'll go ahead. Oh, I didn't even share the results with you guys. Well, these were the results of this poll. Y'all did a great job. Y'all mostly picked C. Sorry about that. And now we're going to go on to our last question of the day. I'm going to launch that poll. I'm going to clear my annotation so we can move down. Okay, scroll. The passage says that superior chess players do not have exceptional memory for which of the following. So this is another one of those line reference questions where we're seeing what is directly stated in the passage. So you might be looking at your notes thinking, where do we need to look? Let's kind of take it.
For this question, can we go back up? Can you scroll back up a little bit for like maybe like 60 seconds and then like go back to the question, please?
Yeah, so I'll give people another like 5 seconds to kind of read these choices and we'll go right back up. Alrighty, so we're gonna go explore. What do they say about chess players? I have no idea where this even is. Like got like 5 million things on my screen. All right, so they talk about chess players in paragraph 3. And let me know if anybody wants to scroll anywhere else. We'll just kind of take some time and skim through these for probably 20 seconds or so, and then we'll go right back down. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and scroll down now so you can see your questions or your answers. And this one is a tricky one too. All right, we'll give it another 10 seconds. Pick your best, your gut choice. Hello, as soon as I said that, people started rapidly picking. So we'll just kind of go ahead. We'll give it another 5 seconds or so. Just pick something because you'd be surprised. Right. I'm gonna close it. Okie dokie. So our results. So we had, a little bit of a tough time between A and D. We had some B and E. So it was all around the board. And some people are messaging me saying D. Some people are messaging me saying A or B. Let me close this poll now. So it says the passage says superior chess players do not have exceptional memory for which one of the following. So we're going to be able to, we can tell that it says, if it says do not, there's going to be one that's not supported by the passage. And then there's going to be, 4 answer choices that we could derive from the passage. So sometimes it's helpful to ask yourself, what am I eliminating here? Okay. So let's think about A, some sequences of moves that are typical of games other than chess. How do we feel about this one? Does anyone want to say why they picked it or did not pick it?
So I picked A because I thought it said if it has to do with chess, they remember it, and if it doesn't have to do with it, they don't.
Okay. All right, and that's up in, let's kind of think back to what's going on there. So they're saying superior chess players have exceptional memory for configurations of chess pieces, but only if those configurations are typical of chess games. So that was your justification for that.
Yeah.
Good. So anybody who picked A or who didn't pick A, where did that pose an issue for you? What did you not like about A?
Because isn't it because it says games other than chess?
Right. Right. People are like, I didn't read right. I like A.
I almost chose A, but I didn't even read the question right, so I don't think my answer is even right. But
That's okay. That's okay. So this is looking interesting because we said sequences of moves are typical of games other than chess. And they do not have an exceptional memory. And we kind of look back up. Another step we can take is just make sure, do we mention chess anywhere else? So we've got, chess is mentioned right here, and on the test you can use Control F. It's much easier than on the PDF for sure. We're not really talking about chess in paragraph 1. In paragraph 2, that's where we got our systemic research, and then we have superior chess players here. And then, we don't have anything in 3. And then in 4, we definitely don't talk about it. So if we really hone in on configurations of chess pieces, only if those configurations are typical of chess games, doesn't necessarily say that stuff outside of chess would not be typical, because maybe we're playing another game and that configuration is typical of chess games. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not I think I would probably be pretty inclined to pick A, but it's always important to kind of look at your other answer choices when it's in technical language like that. So if we look at B, some types of complex sequences without spatial components. How do we feel about that answer choice? Not very many people pick that one.
It doesn't talk about spatial components.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but definitely does not talk about spatial components whatsoever. And I think that one, this one is just, it's not necessarily that the passage agrees or disagrees. It just doesn't talk about it whatsoever. Now let's look at C. Some chess games that have not been especially challenging. How do we feel about this one? Nobody picked it. But why do we not like C as an answer choice?
It's irrelevant?
Yes. It is irrelevant. We're not really concerned about the challenging part. We're really just trying to think about typical games. All right. So what about D, some kinds of arrangements of chess pieces? Because a lot of people picked this one. So why did you or did you not like this answer choice?
In paragraph 2, it states it kind of verbatim, almost the same thing as configurations. I took as some kind of arrangement.
Right. And what's interesting about this one is that they just say some kinds. Some. So we know we're talking about chess pieces and we just say some. So that's a pretty broad, vague answer. And we love vague answers on this test. So this one's looking pretty nice. Now let's look at E, some types of factors. We have another non-committal answer here. Some types of factors requiring logical analysis in the absence of competition. Why do we, not a lot of people pick this one either, but why do we not like E?
In the passages, it doesn't really say anything about the absence of competition.
Good. So this is one that's not necessarily wrong. It's just not stated that it doesn't like it. It felt irrelevant, like Alexa said. Yes. Good. And well, yes, they don't talk about competition. That's exactly what was just stated. So now we've got A and D, which I think, there are two most popular answers. And it says the passage is going to explicitly state that they do not have memory for following. So this is really getting at, did you make an inference or did you look at the passage? And if the passage is saying that there's going to be that the chess players only can apply this to games that show up in typical sequences, sequences of moves of games other than chess, this is what eliminates this answer because it doesn't talk about games other than chess whatsoever. And I think sequences of moves that are typical, I know I probably would be a person to pick this answer choice because, we're sitting here, maybe the sequences are not in chess, but if we remember, it's saying it's typical of games in the chess world. And D is so nicely non-committal that we can pick it and be really confident because it just doesn't really, it just says some kinds of arrangements of chess pieces. It's directly I think somebody said it's like a direct restatement, but if we just kind of restated it and zoomed way out, they're just like, some they'll memorize some, but not others, is what this is saying too. How are we feeling about this answer choice? Much better. Good. Good. I love when people are feeling good. That's the goal. Good. All right. Well, that's all I have for today. And I know I went way over. So thanks. Like, I know y'all have places to be on your Sunday afternoons. So thanks for hanging in there with me. And if you have already put your email in the chat, or if you would still like a recording of this, let me know. Just like, send me your email in the chat before you hop off. And I'll be sure to, send it to you once I get this uploaded. But, also feel here, let me take this off the recording. LOL.